Hello, everybody, and welcome. You're going to hear some music played by Michael Boezi for a few minutes while we let everyone else in. Thank you, Michael. That was, everyone, just so you know, you are listening to music by Michael Boezi of the Rockmores. If you want to see more, you can check out the rockmores.com and michaelboezi.com. And Michael, how about one more short one, and then we'll get this thing started.
Yeah, good. See a lot of people in here, so it's great. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Michael. So I just want to take a second to welcome everybody, and just to say how excited we are that everybody's here. Excuse me if you see me clicking at all, it's because I'm letting people into the meeting. I am going to introduce very briefly and then actually pass it over to other people who are going to do the real talking tonight. My name is Jeremy Fischer. I am one of the founders of Boston for All, and together we all work to put these on. Tonight is incredibly special. I have to tell you all that we at Boston for All are so excited to be able to do this work tonight. Boston for All, really what we do is we try to put on events that support organizations who are doing real solid work on the ground. And I can't think of anyone else who's doing more solid work on the ground level work right now than Violence in Boston. They are a fantastic organization who is really invested in positive social impact and in battling racial injustice in our community and in our city. Anyone who wants to know more about Violence in Boston, I would recommend you check out violenceinboston.org. And a fantastic thing that I've learned about them is that they have what's called social impact teams. If you want to be a part of it, I think you can sign up and you can really do some real work with Violence in Boston. They're really fantastic. And so I want you to know, by being a part of this tonight and joining in, you have actually been a part of a fund. You've already joined a fundraiser that has actually already met its goal. We hoped for $1,500 raised, and so far we have raised $1,513 for Violence in Boston. So you should all give yourselves a pat on the back because you're the ones who did it. On that note, in order to keep moving along, I'd like to introduce the man who is going to be your MC for the night. That man is my very good friend, Andrew Turco, who is, by the way, the person who had the real idea to do these in the first place. So, Andrew Turco, take it away.
Thanks, Jeremy. And thank you, all of you who have joined us tonight. This idea of doing Inside Voices came up back in March, and we were using these virtual storytelling nights as a way to raise awareness, to help people that were hurt by the COVID-19 crisis. And now we really have the opportunity to raise some money for such an important cause. I'm so excited that we have the tellers that we have tonight. They're change makers in different areas of society right now, really shining a spotlight on some of the injustices that are happening and really helping people. Our first storyteller tonight is Tito Jackson. Tito Jackson has spent his life as an active member of the Boston community. He was raised in Roxbury by two community activists. He went to work for Governor Deval Patrick, and he held office himself as a member of the Boston City Council, where he especially focused on education and well-being of community members who had previously been marginalized. Tito is a major leader in recent protests for equity and justice in Boston and nationwide, and he has an intimate knowledge of the work of Violence in Boston. We are incredibly honored that he has taken the time to talk with us tonight out of his busy schedule. Tito Jackson, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate y'all. And that was a beautiful intro. We try to make those as short as possible. One, I just want to thank both of you for creating this space. I believe that we need to be deliberate in creating space for people to share their stories, to tell their truth, and deliberate about ensuring that Boston is for all and not for some who are in a specific economic strata. And so I'm really thankful, and I want to get one of those shirts. Neither of you have my size, so I need you could actually probably take both of them off and knit them together. But a double XL would be fine for me.
Make that happen.
I appreciate it. And by saying that I have intimate knowledge means that I've worked with Monica Cannon for nearly 10 years and the work that she's done. And she's just an awesome, fantastic leader. And I'm really happy that she's getting her props. Today, I guess I want to thank Jeremy for coaching me through this. He just said, speak your truth, tell your story about why you do the work that you do. And hopefully I have enough time to blend in the two stories that I want to tell. The first story I want to tell is really my origin story. And I actually was born at Boston City Hospital. It was before it was Boston Medical Center. I was born there on April 11th, 1975. And interestingly, the prior 7 days it rained. It was like the longest stretch of rain for that year in 1975. So I regularly tell my parents that I brought the sunshine into 1975. And when I was born, the clouds split, the sun shone down, and little cute baby Tito was born. That story is a little bit more difficult than the story that I'm sorry, that one's a little bit happier than the story that I get to tell, but the end of the story is a happy one. I was actually in Boston Medical Center, or at the time Boston City Hospital, for 2 weeks. And then I was moved to foster care. But I was there originally not because I was sick, but I was there because I was given up for adoption. And 2 months in, I actually experienced the greatest gift of my life thus far, and that is the gift of grace. 2 months into my life, I was adopted by Herbert and Rosa Jackson. My dad was a community organizer who fought for equity and inclusion in construction before many of the organizations that are out here now. He was actually out there regularly fighting, shutting down job sites, and ensuring that men of color, women, and Boston residents got on job sites. My mom, Rosa Jackson, had a daycare for 25 years, and they already had 4 kids. And they showed, well, and actually I, on a regular basis, let my older siblings know that unlike them, I was actually chosen. They just kind of had them. But they showed me grace in that they took me in, they made me theirs. And in many ways, I walked the same walk that my dad walked, and as well as my mom. And so, a lot of the reasons why I do what I do on a regular basis is that grace to me is doing things not because you're paid to do them, doing things not because someone coached you to do it. It's just simply doing it because it's the right thing to do. And I would submit to you that both Jeremy and Andrew, you are embodying, and your organization embodies that grace. The one last story I'd like to tell you is, I actually got to tell this yesterday. When I was leaving high school, I wanted to go to a historically Black college. I went to Brookline High School, which is right next to the city of Boston. I was in a MECO program. I know Jeremy has connects there, and I really enjoyed my time at Brookline High. Although in 4th grade it was the first time I was called the N-word, and that really made me think about who and what I was. It was a really difficult time, but definitely. And in all honesty, helped me move forward and think about who I was. But as I was leaving high school, I wanted to go to a historically Black college at HBCU. So I applied to Morehouse College because Martin Luther King went to Morehouse College at age 15. So I was 18, so I thought I was like 3 years behind because that's my role model. And I also applied to University of New Hampshire and a bunch of other schools. And so, when you go to college, you get 2 pieces of paper. That one you're hopefully happy about, which is your admissions letter, and I got in. And then I got this other paper that I was not actually as happy about. It was called my financial aid package. And as I told you earlier, I was one of 8 children. Being one of 8 children actually meant that the $1,500 financial aid package that they gave me for a school that cost almost $30,000 didn't work for me. So I ended up attending another acronym of HBCU, I went to University of New Hampshire, which is a historically blonde college and university. There are definitely not, it's definitely not a historically black college. That being said, the first day that I got to school, my parents brought me up. They brought me up in the station wagon, moved all of my stuff in, and two interesting, really embarrassing things happened. One, my mom, when we were putting all my stuff in drawers, I started taking stuff out, and I realized that my mom did not think that I was going to college. She thought I was actually going to, I guess, camp, because she wrote my name on every single article of clothing, and I still occasionally find a sock that says Tito J on it. In addition, as she was leaving, I had eaten something and I had a little something on the side of my mouth. And so I'm in an all-male dorm. There's only one way that your mom knows how to remove stuff from your mouth. So my mom, of course, licked her hand and put all that on my face in front of all the testosterone that was there. Long story short, we actually were required to go to something called freshman orientation. And we went, we walked about a quarter of a mile up the street, and I was talking to someone, and like you're in school, so you're like cool, you kind of want to go in after everybody else. And I back in, and then I turn around and my stomach drops. And I look around and I don't see another black face out of the 3,000 people who were in the room. And I thought I had walked into the wrong orientation, but it wasn't. I ended up signing up to go to a school that only had 54 black students. One of the things I would submit to you, all of the folks here, is that your condition is not your final conclusion, or our condition is not our final conclusion. Where we are today is not where we have to be or end up tomorrow. We can actually make a huge difference in the things that we do. And I would also submit to you that nobody's coming to save us but us. I'm a big, I like cowboy flicks, and the cavalry is not coming. Literally nobody's coming over the ridge to save us. All of the people, the change agents, the doers, and all those folks are here right now. We actually started an organization soon after me walking into that room called the Black Student Union. I have to say it loud because it was the largest name that I could come up with for 7 people. But those 7 people actually demanded that the university do 4 things: recruit more non-athlete students, recruit more women of color, have a pre-orientation for students of color, and have an active and functional Office of Multicultural Student Affairs. This signature gathering thing, and I know I see my friend Chris on here, I saw Ruben on here, and so we ended up actually organizing. I wouldn't call it that at the time, we called it a signature gathering. Those 7 people got over 4,000 signatures, and today there's a functional Office of Multicultural Student Affairs. There's a pre-orientation that's 20 years old called the Connect program, and there are more students of color there. Not enough, but more, many more than we had at that time. I submit to you that after we're all done with this thing, we all get a headstone. On the headstone are 3 important things. There's your name, the date you got here, and the date you leave. The only thing on that headstone that signifies your life is the dash. And it's a question about what did you do while you were here? When people were dying at the hands of police, what did you say? What did you do? How many folks did you help? And did you leave it better than you found it? And I submit to each of you that the work that you're doing today, the work you'll do tomorrow, the conversations you'll have with your families, your boards, when you're looking at them in the mirror, your executive leadership teams, those are the things that will make the dash of the city of Boston truly mean something. It'll make your life mean something, and it'll make the lives of people around you mean something. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for your story, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. We really appreciate we know there was some juggling of schedules, and we really appreciate you being able to make the time for us. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much, and continue to do the work that you're doing. As Monica Cannon Grant likes to say, we don't need any more allies, we need accomplices. And I look forward to going down with you guys as accomplices and co-conspirators in this piece about truly opening up the city of Boston and making it a Boston for all. Thank you all so much for having me.
I love it. Let's do some work. Our next teller, Dominique Herard, has been a first grade teacher in Brookline, Mass. For 9 years. She is strongly committed to social justice and educational equality. She is a co-leader of her school's equity team and the associate director of the Boston Writing Project. She has educated other teachers nationally and internationally on the importance of social justice and education. Dominique, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. The story I'm going to tell is a little bit about my journey to being a teacher. When I was younger, I wanted to be anything but a teacher. I loved school. It was my favorite. Then I went to the kind of school where each subject had a workbook. And when it was time for science, you took out your science workbook, you took out a page, and that was science. And when it was math, you did the same thing, and so on and so forth. And I loved it. I thought that was the best thing. It was easy. I understood it, and I was good at it. I loved my first grade teacher a lot. And I sometimes would guiltily cross my fingers for what my friends and I would call her headache days, because when she wasn't feeling as well, we got to take more than one page out of the packet. So that was a big day for us. And with that packet and a sharpened pencil, I felt like I was in heaven, and that was my favorite thing. And even though school really worked for me and I liked it, and my identity was really tied to my academic success, I already in first grade had a sense that something wasn't right about that. For example, I had a friend who was really great at math. He could do like really complex math problems in his head, but he never liked to sit down. He liked to observe what was going on outside and look around the room. And he was always in trouble and considered, a bad student because he couldn't sit down, even though I knew he knew a lot. Or my best friend, Melody, she was a better speller than me. She was a better storyteller than me, but often the direction of her letters were wrong. And so it took her a little bit longer to write. And so I got to share my stories with the class a lot, and she didn't. So even though I didn't really have the language in first grade for what that meant, something didn't feel right about that. And I was already beginning to understand and have a sense that this space called school wasn't serving everybody the way that it should have been. And a lot of my school experiences were pretty similar to that. It just felt like teachers were stuffing students with as much knowledge, and that was called learning. And I never thought that I wanted to be on the other side of that. I felt that even though I had the imagination to write stories for hours on end, or I used to write plays for my friends and I would differentiate the parts. So if you didn't like to read as much, you got shorter lines. Even though I had an imagination for that, I really didn't understand, and I wasn't in a place to dream of what school could look like or how that could be different. And it was when I was in college and I started to work at summer camps that people would begin to say, well, you're really good with kids, so I think you should be a teacher. And again, I just didn't have that language as a young adult to be able to articulate why it felt that being a teacher was maybe a little bit more about being good with kids, or maybe a little bit more about just liking kids. I didn't know how to say that, but something felt a little bit different about that. And so I will sometimes wonder how I went from sometimes pretty rudely saying I would never be a teacher to people who suggested it, to having a life where barely a day goes by when I'm not thinking about how to make the classroom world better, even in the summertime. And so I think that a lot of things happen, but two things specifically come to mind. One is a little bit more specific and one's a little bit more broad, but the first thing that I think of is day when I was a senior in college and I woke up from a dream. And I really, really wish I knew what that dream was, and I still don't know, but I remember sitting up in bed and turning to my roommate who was trying to cram for a test, and I said, you know, I think I could be a teacher. And she wasn't as interested in that because she had something else she was doing, but I, you know, started to repeat those words to myself, and I was kind of putting that intent out there, but I still wasn't so sure because I was remembering all the ways in which I hadn't been served in school, and the people that I loved, my friends, hadn't been served by this institution of school. So I'm getting ready that day, and I go to meet my friend in the center of our campus. And as we're sitting down with coffee, she says, you know, I've been meaning to ask you something for a while. I volunteer for this program called Higher Achievement, and it's basically extracurricular support for students after school. Is that something you'd be interested in? And I kind of clapped my hands and I said, yes, this is perfect. I actually just decided this morning that I want to be a teacher. So this sounds great. Let's do it. And I didn't ask any questions beyond that. And so about a week later, it's my first day at this program. This is the first lesson ever. And the organizers handed me a piece of paper to describe what it was that I was going to be doing. And so with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, we were going to listen to a Bob Marley song. It was called Redemption Song, and talk and write about liberation. And I was really intrigued. This was one of my favorite songs, but I hadn't really broken it down in that way. And the things that happened in that space, the first lesson I ever, taught, I like to think I facilitated it a little bit more, was really magical. These young, gifted Black and brown minds were talking about mental slavery and freeing yourself from it and understanding how their minds and souls could be liberated by the oppression around them. And I couldn't believe that, even though this was technically an after-school program, but that this was something that could be considered school, that it involved a conversation, not just a dictation from an educator, that justice was at the center of it. And then they wrote, and they did the things that you tend to do in school. They could either write a letter or a poem or a song, and everything that every single one of those young people produced was brilliant. So the fact that justice could be connected to literacy felt like everything to me. And I was in, and I walked out of that classroom and said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do, and this is what I want my classroom to look like. And at the time, I didn't really have a sense of like districts and standards and things like that. That might be a story for another day, but I just knew that that's what I wanted to reproduce and recreate in any kind of classroom space I was ever going to be in. And I felt like that was really the starting point to move me on this path. And the second thing I think of as I really started to reflect on how confident those students were, the way they understood their identities and their selves, I was really starting to, again, revisit my own school experiences and really seeing all the ways that I didn't feel like I mattered in the school space. I think with my family and at home, that was clear, and I was confident there. But even when I got answers right, teachers would think I cheated. Even when I did everything I wanted to do, something about my presence and my being still upset people or still confused people. And so I knew that that not all schools would serve me. And one of the big things that I remember is I was an English major. And so in the 16 years of elementary school, high school, and college, very few books featured people who looked like me. And many of the books that I did read include people who looked like me and were in pain. And so as I thought about the magic that happened in that classroom in DC and wanting to replicate that, I think a big piece of that was being able to create space for storytelling. For not only storytelling that's oral, but also the kind when you're reading books, and to be able to find books that look like students and that don't look like students, so that we're continually being able to share stories. What I saw in that classroom where students were telling each other stories, and they were talking about what they were feeling, and listened to each other. And when one person said, well, this is fair because this has happened to me, but then they heard that it wasn't fair for the person next to them, they listened to that and they used that to think about change. And so I about like creating spaces for storytelling, for a diverse representation and voices of all kinds. But again, not just the pain, any kind of representation that sort of brings together the full picture of who a person could be. I knew that was what I wanted to do. And I wasn't sure how to do it. And sometimes even to this day, I still get confused about how I do it, because I think there's a lot of ways in systems that you can be distracted from your purpose and your mission and your goal. But I remember those experiences, and that is something that really draws me to that. And I think that on this pathway where we can have conversations with young people about justice, about how they can be active participants in the world that we want to live in, and sharing as many different stories as possible, is just something that I think is really beautiful, and something that still kind of drives me to this day. And I think anybody who knows me knows I really love picture books, and I think a lot of the picture books I get excited about, that I hope I get some of my students excited about, is a little bit of a retroactive excitement of so many stories that weren't given to me as a student. So many things that it took me so long to learn about myself, because I didn't have that space in school. I wasn't given the space all the time to be my full self. There were definitely some beautiful exceptions. I've had some lovely educators, and the ones that I remember well are the ones that were able to support me, or to show me that they saw me, even if they didn't use those words. And so I think that the excitement that I have for the different storybooks, but also stories that kids share, is really just something that motivates me and drives me towards working in a world where everyone's humanity is realized, is respected, is valued. And even if the full actualization of that isn't gonna happen in my lifetime, that I can build those bricks, that I can come together with these first graders that I learn so much from every day. I often tell them I love working with them because they teach me, because we learn, because we're working together. But all those bricks that we put in will eventually someday, maybe not that I can see or that they can see, but someday build a world that is for everybody and that works for everyone. So thank you all for listening to that story, a little slice of my journey. Thank you.
Dominique, I can't say more about how important your job is. I was thinking, I was in first grade back in 1987, and I remember Ms. Young's game, I remember Miss Young's name and the games we played in her class and the different things she said. And it's so exciting that someone who's doing so many things that is so powerful has such an impact on people's lives. And thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
I'm stealing the microphone from Andrew Turco for just a moment, not really on my behalf, but on my children's behalf. Dominique, I didn't want to do this to you before you spoke because it might not be fair, but I'm going to do it to you now and tell you that both of my children have been in Miss Herard. I can't really call her Dominique, it just doesn't feel right. In Miss Herard's first grade class. And I just have to say that it is such enrichment for my family entirely that my children have gotten to spend as much time with Miss Herard as they have. So thank you so much for the story, but really for everything that you have done throughout at least the 2 years we've educated my kids, and I'm sure many other years as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So next up, we are going to have Julia Mejia. Immigration has always been a central part of Julia Mejia's story. She was born in the Dominican Republic. She arrived in Dorchester at age 5 with her mother, who was undocumented. She soon got to work advocating for the vital services they needed in the city. Finding inspiration in the words of Reverend Liz Walker, she went on to become the first in her family to graduate from high school and college. After college, she began a career as a journalist covering politics and became the first, where she discovered further inspiration to work towards government accountability. She created and led a civic engagement group focused on voter registration. Julia knows firsthand the importance of every voter. In the most recent election, she won her city seat on the Boston City Council by 1 vote, and she works to make sure that every voice is heard. Julia Mejia, we're so excited to have you here. The floor is yours.
Hello.
Yay.
Yay.
Welcome.
Hello. I'm rocking my Be Brave shirt because I oftentimes it's hard to be brave and bold in times when people aren't ready for it. So I woke up today and I felt like I needed to be reminded of this this morning. So I am a storyteller, so I'm really excited to be here, and thank you all for inviting me, and also for supporting Determined Divas and our efforts to get family relief to folks who need it most during COVID-19. So thank you for supporting us in that effort and for hosting a fundraiser. When we got the email, I was like, adult stories and drinks, what kind of situation is this? And, you know, so I'm just really grateful and really do appreciate all of that you have done and learning more about all of the amazing organizations that you're supporting. So happy to be a part of that. And here, happy to be telling my story on behalf of Violence in Boston and Monica Cannon Grant, who goes hard every day for our people. So I'm happy to be here on this day telling my story. So, well, you know, I was listening to the other stories, and you know, when you hear from other people, you always just get so poured into, right? And you feel really privileged to hear people's journey. And I felt like, you know, immigration is a big part of my journey here to America. I didn't get to meet my father until I was 5 years old. He had left the Dominican Republic, and my mom, and he had made a promise that he was going to come back and get us, but he never fulfilled that promise. And my mom was left there, then had me, and a few years later decided to move to America in search of a better life. So my dad had lived in New York, my mom landed in Boston, and I was being raised by my grandparents in the Dominican Republic. So my first memory of my mom was when I was 5 as well, when I came to the States. And so I remember coming to America. I was living in the Dominican Republic. I had this big, wild, crazy hair. And I was running around literally barefoot and just like a little, just, you know, out in the tropics, if you will. And I remember the leaves, just the ground, just everything is really poor. And I just remember running around without any shoes, and then meeting my dad, who came to, back then they called it to reconocerme, which is to acknowledge that I'm his daughter, so filled out the paperwork so I can come to America. Anyways, I met my 2 stepsisters for the first time in the Dominican Republic, and they had really, really, really straight hair. And I remember this moment because remember I had this big puffy hair, and I just remember being so memorized about how beautiful they were, and that these were my 2 sisters, and that I was meeting them for the first time. So there was a little bit of excitement there. But when I came to America, I landed at, I think it was either JFK or LaGuardia. It was one of those 2 airports. And I remember having a pair of really tight shoes on. They were so incredibly tight. I don't know why I remember that detail. I just remember, maybe it was because I was a little savage just running around without any shoes, and all of a sudden here I am, you know, in an airplane with tight shoes on. But I remember being in this airplane and hearing a language that I had never heard, and being afraid, and landing in New York. And I remember the sidewalks, they were incredibly big and they were paved, and I felt like I was in a whole different world. And I was scared because I wasn't with my grandparents. And that journey here was difficult because, you know, I had to stay with my dad for a little bit of time. And then I came to Boston to be with my mom. And my mom, who I talk a lot about, at one point, she came here on a visa, but she had overextended her stay in became undocumented. She had lost her visa. And so I remember at a very early age, I became the official translator. I had to learn how to speak English watching Sesame Street. And I did. Nafagalavagus and Big Bird, those were my besties. And learning how to speak English and helping to translate for my mom. I became that kid around the way that everybody brought with them to the welfare office, to the court appointments, because they knew if they brought me along, I was gonna, you know, fight. I talk about this story a lot as part of my journey, because it was during these times that I really learned how to have a voice, because I knew that if I needed to get anything, I was gonna have to fight for it. So I talk a lot about the fight and the struggle, because that's what I've known my entire life is how to fight and how to be in spaces that oftentimes are not meant for you to be in, and being disregarded or disrespected because of you just either didn't speak the language or understood the dynamics. So I bounced from place to place. I bounced a lot because we couldn't afford to stay in one place for a long time. So I learned, that's where I got my award-winning personality from, because making new friends was not easy, especially always being the new kid. And because we were really poor, you know, I didn't have the best shoes or the sneakers or whatever the case was. So I always had to make up for the stuff that I didn't have. But I did have a personality, and I used my personality to get out of a lot of situations. And I remember once I was 12 years old, and there was an insurance agency that had just moved to my neighborhood, and I wanted a pair of Nikes. And this was in the 80s. Okay, so I'm a lot older than what I look. Okay, this is when the 80s and the Nikes had first come out, and I wanted a pair of Nikes so bad, and my mom wasn't gonna pay for them. So I went to this insurance agency and I said, I know everybody around the way. If you do a flyer, I will tell everybody about your business, and you know, you can pay me. I made $26. I told everybody about this insurance agency. And then I went back for some more. They were like, no, we're good. You already did your job. So I got $26 out of that one. But I had my first taste at being an entrepreneur, and I did not make enough money to buy Nike. So I ended up with like I think they were ponies, like they were like the bootleg version of the Nikes. But nonetheless, that moment really taught me about the importance of work ethic, right? And like working for what you have. And because we were poor, I had to do my part to help. And so the next time I went to another insurance agency to translate, I walked out of there with a job under the table because I wasn't old enough to work, but I got a job as a translator and doing filing. And then I got another job. So all of this to say is that my entire life has been a series of work and utilizing my voice. And I found ways to bring these worlds together. I ended up dropping out of high school and going back. And this is the story for me that I always tell, because it interrupted my entire cycle of poverty, and I would not be here today if it wouldn't have been for this woman. But the Reverend Liz Walker, if you don't know her, you better Google her. She's dope. She was the first African-American anchor ever in the state of Massachusetts, a news anchor. And she went to talk about what life was like for her. And at the time, I was selling shoes at Tom McCann's shoe store, which is like the Payless of today. I was working, I was also cleaning offices with my mom, and I was going to school. And I wasn't on the graduate track because I had already dropped out. I was not the college track. I was on do not drop out. So nobody was really talking to me about college or anything like that. So anyways, Liz goes to my school and shares her story. And I was in the auditorium and I was like, oh my God, I want to be just like her. What do I need to do? I needed to graduate. So I was 19 and a half, almost 20 by the time I graduated. But I would not be here today if it wouldn't have been for Liz Walker, who shared her story and interrupted my entire cycle of poverty. And because of that, I've dedicated my entire life to working with young people and working in community. Because of her, I am here. I ended up going to college. I wanted to be just like her. I wanted to be a reporter, but my neighborhood was always on the news. And like Tito was talking about, when I went to school, there was only like 30 people of color and everybody else was white. And my relationships with white people were not always great. I only saw white people around my way when they were snatching somebody up. And so that was my first real interaction. Like I even ate broccoli and cheese for the first time when I went to college, right? So all of these things happened to me in college. But while I was also there, there was a a campus police officer that was harassing one of the students. And we got up in arms and we created a little petition. And I started going around trying to get people to sign it, that we were gonna get this cop in trouble, the whole 9 yards. And I bumped into a professor, and God rest his soul, he has since passed. His name was Mr. Lettieri. And he said, you know, that you could do a lot more from the inside instead of just, you know, fighting out here. And that stuck with me. So I decided to become an RA, like a resident assistant. And I started working in the school system, within the campus, and trying to change. And I would bring people from my campus into Dorchester so they can see it wasn't as bad as what they were looking at in the news. And so during that process, we created a diversity council. We really pushed for change within that environment. And during that process, I realized that I didn't want to tell the news that was happening in my neighborhood. That I felt like what I wanted to do, instead of telling those stories, that I wanted to do something about it. So I decided to do my internship at the Boys and Girls Club in the South End, and working with young people. And this is when the VHS tapes were like the cassettes. Like you guys, we got phones now, but back then it was like these big, you know, VHS recorders. And there I was teaching kids how to utilize video as a way to deal with their anger, as a way to help reduce the violence that we were seeing in our neighborhoods. And so I say all of this because I ended up being a reporter finally, because I moved to New York. I tell long stories. I'm almost done. There's gonna be a button at the end of this. I moved to New York because I still wanted to be a reporter, and I knew I wasn't gonna get any real opportunities here in Boston because it just wasn't the time or the climate for me to really get any ahead here. And because I worked with young people, when I moved to New York, I was utilizing video again, like filming young people who lived in Washington Heights. I was like still trying to get into the industry somehow. And MTV put out a contest about how HIV and AIDS, for World AIDS Day. And I entered a contest with this young woman who I was working with. She had lost her mom to AIDS, and we did a documentary short for a film. And MTV called, and I'm like, oh my God, my moment is here. I'm gonna be a reporter or whatever. And they were looking for a Latina to cover the presidential elections in 2000 when Gore and Bush were fighting, and Bush stole the election. So I covered that elections. And they were calling because they were casting a Latina, and they wanted to cast a young woman who I had presented in the documentary. And I went and I said, well, she's not 18, because they were looking for somebody who was 18. I wasn't in college, so I knew they weren't thinking about me, but I went there to pitch other kids. And I said, these are all the young people that I've been working with. You know, maybe one of them could be the next reporter. And they said, well, why not you? You know, remember I had big hair. Don't forget, I started with my hair. I'm coming back to my hair. And because I had worked with young people and because I had served my community, MTV decided to give me an opportunity to be on air. And I became one of the first urban Latina reporters covering the presidential elections for MTV in 2000. And I say all of this because I came in through the back door. And everything that I've ever done in my life hasn't been easy. And every space that I've had to walk in through, I've had to disrupt. And sometimes my disruption is disruptive to the process. And I've learned that along the way. But being at MTV, I had to fight for every single story that I told that was impacting Black and Brown. young people, because MTV, every time I pitched the story, they would say, well, what does that have to do with Iowa? And I would say, why does everything that I want to share with the world have to do with Iowa or something? Because it wasn't relevant. And if it wasn't relevant to the entire country, then it wasn't worth telling, which is basically what they were saying to me. So I learned how to tell those stories anyways, and I pushed. And at MTV, we created a diversity council too, by the time I got done with them. And here I am. I ran for office because I was tired of transactional ways that people were inviting my people to the table, but it was only based on political interest or other people's fights. And I decided to run because I really wanted to make a difference. And I think that my journey and everything that I have been through in my life prepared me to represent Boston in this moment in time. And, you know, my mom became a US citizen. She became, you know, naturalized, and she voted for me in September for the first time, and my name was on the ballot. And for my mom to vote for her daughter, who she left in the Dominican Republic, and for us to clean offices together and to go through everything that we went through, and for me to run and run without anything, because we didn't have a lot of money, even enough to send out a citywide mailer, but for my mom to be able to cast a ballot for me, knowing what she had been through and what we have both been through, and for me to win by one vote, I feel like I had to knock down that door to get inside. And I feel like everything that has happened in my life has happened for a reason and has prepared me for this moment in time. And I'm tired of fighting, but I know how important it is for us to fight for everything, because nothing ever comes easy, but that is part of the journey, and that is why I do it, because I have a responsibility to ensure that I leave this place better than what I found it, and that no matter how uncomfortable it is for me in any space that I have come into, or how hard I have to go just to be heard, that what I have to say matters. And so I ran to change the way we do business. And I'm grateful for that one vote. And I swear this will be the last thing that I say, and then y'all can put me on pause, is that when the day of the swearing in was in Faneuil Hall, which was the same place where I became a naturalized citizen. And then when I was walking down to go in, I still felt like they were gonna say, "Oh my God, we made a mistake, you did not win." I still did not believe that I won. And then until the end, even when I got into the official job and I was sitting there, I still felt like at any moment they were like, "And we made a mistake, you did not win." And so yeah, that to me is my full circle, recognizing that I'm now in a place that I've fought literally my entire life, and recognize how important it is for me to bring my lived experience into this space, and never forget who I'm there to speak on behalf of. And that is, I told you, I gave you all of these stories in one little package. I know you wanted 2 stories, and I just started babbling. And so I just wanted to just say thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak my truth and share my story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia Mejia. I went in the other room for a minute to talk with my wife, and she said, "What did you do to that woman's introduction?" And I want to sincerely apologize. My public speaking background comes from doing stand-up when I was in my 20s, and we all agreed that I wouldn't make any jokes during this because we had a lot of serious, important people here. And so I'm fumbling through this, and I appreciate your patience. And I'm so grateful that we were able to have you here, that we were able to help people during our last Inside Voices with the wonderful organization that you started. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. We're so fortunate that we were able to just listen to you for a few minutes. And thank you for the great work that you continue to do for our city.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm like, I know this is being recorded. If this was live, I had an emotional breakdown. The budget process was like, oh my God.
Oh.
I'm still feeling that trauma. So I was like, if this was being recorded live, they're like, oh my gosh, she's so not fit to be in office. She's having emotional breakdowns in public, but that's okay.
We can bleep stuff out. Say what you want to say.
No, I am all of who I am. Like, you know, it's all good.
I love it. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, you all. Have a good night.
Thank you too. Next up is a teller that I was fortunate enough to know professionally and personally before tonight. Cathy Pemberton has had a long career of social work across many systems. She's committed to providing quality care and seeking access for tough-to-find mental health and addiction services. She's a truth teller and she's good at confrontation. She's always interested in learning and knowing from other people's point of view. She loves all dogs and animals, frosty IPAs with friends and colleagues, road trips, live music, appreciating wisdom and calm that can come with age, especially during this difficult time on earth. Cathy, we're pumped that you're here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrew. And I just want to say hello and thank you to my dear, dear social work colleagues in California, Annie and Rick. And this is going to make me tear and her tear before I even start. But to my sister, Mary Beth in Colorado, I love you. And this is my story and this is your story. August 19th, 1984, I loaded everything that I thought that I would need for my freshman year at Penn State into my father's light blue Chevrolet Impala. My dad, my mom, myself, we got into the car. We started to drive away from Binghamton to make the trip to State College, Pennsylvania. It's a 4-hour trip. And it's a beautiful trip from southern New York through northeastern Pennsylvania. I was raised in Binghamton, New York, the youngest of 4. And it, as most people say, it was a good place to grow up. It's a small town, but it had, at the time, in the 80s, when I was being raised, there was a lot of work. There was Endicott Johnson Shoes, GE, IBM, there's a university. So a lot of people had jobs. There was good schools, sports, beautiful scenery. It's right on the Susquehanna River, near Ithaca, near places in Pennsylvania, Tunkhannock Falls. It's a beautiful place. I had a pretty regular growing up without a lot of big trouble in my life at that time. I went to school. I had siblings that I could love and learn from and play around with. I took advantage of everything I could, and also, like most people said before, was from a very young age instilled with a hard work ethic. My dad grew up in the Depression. My mother grew up without a lot in Scranton. And so we always had to work, and we started working before even we could officially work at 16. And I deeply appreciate that. And it has served all of us and continues to serve the next generation of my nephews. So my parents and I drove from Binghamton to State College and pulled up to Curtin Hall in North Campus, the North Campus of Penn State. It took one trip for my dad and I to take everything out of the car into the elevator of Curtin Hall and hit the button to go up 7 floors to where I was assigned 702 Curtin Hall. my dad was a great partner for this. He was always a calm and kind and fun man. So it was good to have him by my side as I took on this new place I would call home. And so we got up, elevator doors opened, and 702 Curtin Hall was right there, door wide open. And my roommate had arrived before me. So I knew her name, but I knew nothing else. And I looked in, and there were, in this very small space, there were 2 beds, 2 desks, and a window. And we didn't have computers or phones at that time. I had a phone card tucked in my back pocket. And I knew from the moment I walked in that my roommate and I could not have been more different. She had, on these cinder block walls, managed to put all of this netting up and covered the entire wall with carnival animals. And I was an athlete. I didn't have a lot of stuff. I grew up liking boys, but I wasn't boy crazy. I just wanted to go there, make friends, have a good time, play some sports. And so I'm in this dorm room, and I have this deep missing of my sister. My sister is off at school in Syracuse. She was my roommate. She was my roommate for 18 years. And we watched cartoons, and we got along, and we fought, and we played soccer, and we started drinking beers. And the drinking age was 18. So when I was 16, she's on this. She looks very much like me. I could use her ID. She was a great roommate. And this is life. This is college. You get assigned to someone who's a complete stranger, and the door shuts, and there you are. So 702 Curtin Hall. It's August 19th, 1984. And the biggest blessing in that time and up and, for the rest of my life was 602 Curtin Hall was a girl named Caroline, who would become my best friend and is pretty integral later in the story. So I'm in the dorm with my dad and feeling stunned, looking stunned, not quite knowing what to do with this person that I will soon be left alone with. And my dad was just staring out the window. And I was looking for a little camaraderie, like, Dad, help me out. What are we going to do? And he just looked and said, do you understand? Do you see the view? And I said, Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, that's Beaver Stadium, Penn State University, Nittany Lions, Joe Paterno, DJ Dozier, the greatest running back of all time. That's your view. He was so thrilled. He was thrilled for me. He was thrilled for himself. I thought it was great, but I was more concerned about what am I going to do without my bestie roommate? And this is all uncharted territory. So my parents pulled away, and I settled into freshman year, and met Caroline, who lived downstairs, who would become one of my best friends. And we got to it. We went to classes, we tailgated, we went on adventures around that part of Pennsylvania. I went spelunking in some cave, which was something I never thought that I would do, and I don't think I'll ever do it again. And freshman year went along in a way that was also much like my life growing up. I didn't hit major bumps. Sophomore year came along, back into the Chevy Impala. After a summer job in Binghamton, my dad drove me back, dropped me off, and I got started. Started going to classes. Caroline was there, other friends. We were having a good time. And then things changed. I started to slow down. I didn't feel myself. it was hard to go to class. I stopped going to class. I wasn't sleeping well. It's very difficult to describe. And for anyone that's listening who has been through something that I'm about to describe, or loved someone who has, you'll begin to kind of click into what I'm talking about. But I started to lose myself, and I didn't. At the time in the 80s, there wasn't a lot of campus mental health. There wasn't a lot of talk about depression. I started to try to write a journal, but I really didn't have words. I didn't have any feel. I felt nothing, and I couldn't describe the nothingness. And I was worried. My friends were really worried. We were 20. They didn't know where the old Cathy had gone and what had happened. And there wasn't a major event. There wasn't any specific thing that was happening around the onset of this. So I fell into this depression. And Penn State is a big place, 40,000 students. I had a small class, a music theory class, and my professor, Dr. Julian Thayer, noticed that I wasn't in class, and that I had really started to look like something was going on. He picked up the phone and called my parents in Binghamton, New York. And my parents, my mom said she recalls getting a phone call. She was really scared and very grateful. And he said, your daughter's in trouble. She's having a depression, and she's going to need to take some time off. And so my dad drove down, and my friends were at a loss. I was at a loss, put all of my things back into the Chevy Impala, and then drove 4 hours with my dad trying to say what he could say. He was heartbroken. He didn't know how to make me laugh, how to make me smile, how to tell me that it was going to be okay. And I just looked out the window, and I had no idea what had happened, where I went, or what to expect. I went home, and I was in Binghamton. I was in the house I grew up, 521 Midvale Road, sitting on the couch, and no guidebook, and no one who could come in and kind of say, this happens, and this is what to expect. So soon after I was home, I was admitted to a local hospital, an inpatient psychiatry unit at a local general hospital, and it was hell. I was in a room with a roommate who was pacing and scared and screaming and craving a lot of things. And I was in slow motion, no words. And she just wanted a partner. She wanted to vent. She wanted me to tell and say that this is shitty. And I agreed it was all shitty. I just couldn't come up with the words. And I think it was the second or third day. There was a nurse. She wasn't nice. She was telling me that I just because I was in college didn't mean I was too good for this place, and I better start participating. And then on the day 3, there was a announcement around 11:30, and it was, patients report to the kitchen for the chicken salad making group. That was the activity. And I sat in my room, I think looking up at the ceiling, wondering, how did I go from a full caseload at Penn State to being called to walk down the hall, to put on a hairnet, and to make chicken salad? And in all of that numbness, I knew I had to say, I'm okay. I thought I was pretty hopeless, but I'm actually okay. I have family, I have friends, I have faith, and I will not feel so hopeless that I don't want to live. You can start to write my discharge paperwork, and I got myself out and home and back on the couch, but I was as numb as I was the day I went in. And I was home for a few days. And the next part of this story is still unbelievably remarkable to me. My roommate, Caroline, drove and showed up at Binghamton in her, I think it was a Toyota Camry. She showed up, and somehow, it was decided that she was going to take me on a tour of New England psychiatric hospitals so we could find a place where I could understand what the fuck was going on, get the care that I needed, and heal. So I had a suitcase, we got in the car and drove off. We drove to Connecticut. We stopped at the Institute of the Living in Hartford. I felt nothing. I stumbled around. I said, no, this isn't for me. So we get in the car, we go to Rhode Island, we go to another place. No. And Caroline, she's pretty tough. She's like the second youngest of 12. And she knows how to get things done. And she knew me enough, even though she didn't know this version of me, that she was going to figure this out. So somehow we ended up in Connecticut in a place called New Canaan, where there's a private hospital, and my dad was an insurance agent. I did have insurance, but it was going to require more, than that. So we drove up. The medical director walked out, Dr. Michael Sheehy. He looked a little bit like Michael Caine, and it soon was clear he wasn't letting me leave. And so I didn't really have a choice, and I stayed, and she drove away, and I stayed for several weeks, and that was okay. It was a time when there was a lot more in certain hospitals time and for healing. Now it's more 3 to 5 to 7 days diagnosis at the time of arrival, and then they start discharging you. I arrived in this place. I felt numb. I had no words. And I started to feel safe, started to connect with myself, started to connect with the other patients. There was a whole range of people who were there. Started to walk around. It was possible we could walk around and be outside, even though we were on checks. And I started to feel myself come back. I started to sleep. I started to taste things. I started to laugh. My family were visiting. They noticed. My parents started to smile. In this hospital, when you start to feel better, this isn't possible now in any place, but you can take a pass. So I could have my family come up and go have lunch. But this is towards the end of the story. The one thing that happened there was you would also take field trips. So there was a silver van, and we, the patients, myself and my buddies, we called it the Silver Bullet. And so if you were really well and getting close to leaving, on a weekend you could sign up for the Silver Bullet, get a packed lunch, get some sunscreen, take a towel, and go to the beach. And this was in Westport, Connecticut, the seaside town where there's a lot of wealth and a lot of summer visitors. And so they know the van. And I mean, at the time, I didn't know that they knew that this was the van from the inpatient psychiatry hospital, but I didn't care. I was so thrilled to be with my friends that I connected with in the hospital, to be heading out into or close to the ocean, and I could see people and smell the ocean. And I remember looking out of the window of the Silver Bullet as we parked and watching families go by and get ice cream and buy saltwater taffy. And I just knew I was back. I was looking forward. I was ready to go back to school. And it's a very special memory, and I feel like I did heal and get better, and it wasn't the end. I had gone back in and out a few times, but you know, I talked to Andrew about this when he was helping me along a little bit, and I think, as I said before, for anyone who has experienced really the depth of a depression for themselves or a loved one, it's very different than if you're blue, if you're sad, if you've sort of, you know, the shit that comes with losing a job, that's devastating, and it can lead to a dark depression. But when everything is completely flat and what you feel is nothing, that's when you need someone or someplace to give you hope. And the inspiration that I have found through my experience and how it connected to my career in social work has been such a gift. I feel like when I sit with someone and they're coming into a busy psych emergency room and it's chaotic and that is hell, and someone comes with a clipboard and starts to ask them if they're going to kill themselves or someone else, if you're able to go up and just really say, I'm so sorry you're here, and is there something that I can give you? Is there a drink, or is there someone I can call? Anyone who understands what you're going through. I know you don't think so, but there is a way out of this. And I very rarely share my story. I've written about it. I shared a lot with residents because I worked in a training hospital, and I felt like they really, when there was a huge gap in them understanding, I felt like I would pull this card out to say, I sort of have special training, and I want to let you know what this person may need from you. So that's my inspiration into purpose, and I wouldn't be here without my family. I still miss my sister, Mary Beth, and she will be forever the greatest roommate. And I love her dearly, and I love my friends, Rick and Annie, and everyone who's been there for me, and Caroline. And I really appreciate Jeremy and Andrew, you including me in this, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Cathy. No matter how many times I hear that story, I still love it, and I love the idea of a person that has been in that darkness being able to guide people towards light. I work in a career where we run into a lot of mental health situations, and we're not mental health professionals. And when we try to talk to people who are having a mental health emergency, we're talking from a script, and we're trying to connect, but we're not able to because we've never necessarily felt that. And the idea that you can have that conversation with someone and connect with them and let them know that there's a way out of that darkness and there's a lifeline, and you can tell them because you've lived it, is such an amazing gift. And I'm sure the people that you have helped, it has meant so much to them. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for telling your story tonight.
Thank you, Andrew.
Next up is Dr. Robbie Goldstein. He's a primary care physician and an infectious disease specialist. Dr. Robbie Goldstein is a leader in Boston's medical community. His work is focused on living with and the at-risk people who have HIV. He is the medical director for the transgender health program at the Massachusetts General Hospital. Dr. Goldstein also teaches at the Harvard Medical School and is the lead author of several influential articles in medical journals. He is now running for Congress in the 8th District of Massachusetts, and he's seeking to become a change agent in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Dr. Goldstein, for joining us tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction and for inviting me to tell my story tonight with all of these other amazing storytellers. I want to start by saying that, as you heard, I'm a doctor and I'm not much of a storyteller. People usually tell me their stories. That is the privilege I have in some ways of being a physician and getting to work with patients every single day. So I will do my best to tell you my story and the story of working within an institution to create the change that I think we so desperately needed in that institution. But in that process, I'm going to weave in the stories that the patients have told me, because I think it is true to form, and really the way that my story has come together is by hearing all of these other stories. So I actually want to kind of take a big step back many years ago to my training as a physician. For people who know about medical training, after medical school, there's a period of time that's called residency, where you are officially a doctor, but you are under the guidance and the supervision of more senior physicians. And during that process, for me, I went into internal medicine. I was learning to be a medicine doctor. I had a primary care practice that was my own, and I was able to see patients every week and take care of them. My second year in training, training's 3 years long, my second year in training, a young man walked into my clinic and sat down in the room, and it was the first time that I had seen him, and we started having a conversation. And I'll share with you his name. He has subsequently told this story in many public venues, and he's okay with me sharing his name. His name was Corey, and he said to me, I'm transgender, and I have never been able to go to a physician and feel comfortable and feel welcomed in the office. And I took a deep breath and said, well, we're gonna make this space affirming for you. We're gonna make this the best experience you've ever had. And I also said, I want you to be my teacher. I want you to tell me when I do this wrong. I want you to tell me when I do this right. I want you to make me better. And in the process, I'm gonna take care of you as best as I possibly can. And together, we went through the next 2 years of my training. And Corey became an incredible teacher for me. He became the person who I would think about all hours of the night to make sure that he had everything he needed. He became the person who, when I knew he was coming up on the schedule, a smile would come to my face and I would say, oh, I get to see Corey later this week. And at the end of those 2 years that I had with Corey, I had to leave my residency training, and you pass your primary care panel on to a next doctor in training, someone else who's coming in. And I searched and searched and searched for somebody who could really live up to Corey, could take care of Corey in the way that I felt that he deserved to be cared for. And I found somebody for him and passed him on with tears and hugs and all of the things that come at the end of a patient-doctor relationship. And I went on and I did my fellowship training. And that's the next step of training after residency. I did mine in infectious diseases. I did it specifically because I wanted to care for those people living with HIV and those at risk for HIV. I did it because Corey inspired me and taught me about the disparities of HIV in the transgender community. I did it because I felt like we needed to take care of this community that had been left out for a very long time. And so I embarked on this fellowship training, and with each day and each week passed, Corey I knew was taken care of, and I was on to other patients. At the end of my training, I was sitting in a room with a lot of folks at MGH, doctors and nurses, people who work at the valet station, people who worked in the cafeteria, social workers, anyone who worked in the hospital. And we were all there together because we recognized that we wanted to do better for the transgender community. And I was sitting in that room and I was thinking about Corey, and I was thinking, how can we make this entire hospital a safe space for him? How can we make the entire Mass General institution better? And through hard work, and through a lot of meetings, we came up with some plans about how to make the hospital a more affirming space. And I wanted to sort of put this in context a little bit. This is 2014, 2015. This is a time where, for people who remember the history around Mass General and the news, it was a time when there was quite a lot of press around MGH and diversity. There was quite a lot of press around MGH and its sort of conservative trends. And I was there trying to convince an institution with a bunch of other folks that we should be moving into this next frontier. We should be moving into this space, taking care of trans folks, affirming them at all ages. And I recognize in that moment something that I think you have heard from almost every other storyteller tonight, that what is right takes a lot of work. What is right is oftentimes incredibly hard to do, but what is right is the thing that we have to do. And so I decided that we had to convince people about what was right to do. And I went on a bit of a door knocking tour within the hospital, probably the beginning stages of my political career, although I didn't think of it that way. I went and knocked on the doors of department leaders and hospital administration, influential people all throughout the hospital. And I sat down in their office and I told them about Corey, and I told them about other patients, and I told them about the stories of the trans community and why we had to do better. And we, over a few years, were able to build a coalition of leaders in the hospital and grassroots support from the top down and the bottom up to create a better space for the transgender community. We had a lot of highs, we had a lot of lows, we got really close to some amazing, enormous things. We felt at times that was all being snatched away, but we were able to eventually open the doors of a clinic, the Transgender Health Program at MGH. And I remember very distinctly the first weekend right before we opened, that first day we were gonna open actually on Tuesday, right after Labor Day. And so I spent 3 days in a space in the hospital that hadn't been used really since the 1970s, sort of tucked away. And my husband and I went in Saturday, Sunday, Monday with Windex and vacuum cleaners and everything you can imagine to clean a space. And we had an extreme makeover home edition within this clinic space to get it ready and get it set, to make it feel welcoming and affirming. And we opened our doors on Tuesday, and I thought, well, the hard work is done. Now it's time for us to take care of these patients. And I realized on day one that the hard work was just beginning. And there was so much more to do. In those first months, I was a doctor, I was a nurse, I was the person who answered the phones, I was the person who drew people's blood, I was the person who was there to take care of whatever might come up. Our windows didn't work, our air conditioning was broken, we didn't have enough computers to run the clinic. I was in the space as much as I had to be to make sure that we could create a space that was affirming for everyone. And over time, things got easier for sure. And we now have a great and fully functional space that is wonderful, but it was because we had to sort of dig in the beginning. And in one of those early days, I was sitting at the phone, waiting to make sure that we could schedule appointments for patients, and the phone rang, and the person on the other side said, "Hi, this is Corey, and I'm looking for a new primary care doctor." And it was Corey, and we recognized immediately what had happened, that he was looking for a primary care doc. I was a primary care doc in this new program, that he was ready to move and to come into this space, that I had created this space in many ways for him and to make sure that he felt welcomed. And we had our moment on the phone and scheduled him an appointment, and he showed up with 2 flags in his hands, a trans flag and a rainbow flag, to hang on our walls. I had told him on the phone that we had nothing to hang on our walls because we were such a new clinic. And he showed up, and we gave each other a hug and recreated that patient-doctor relationship instantaneously. And he looked around and said, "This is the space, this is it, this is what we have been talking about." And I have to say, Corey's story is one of so many stories of patients that I have been able to take care of, that I've been able to see be who they truly are because we were able to create the space. I've had patients who are immigrants to this country who had left discrimination and persecution, had faced terrible times at the southern border and had come up to Boston and walked into our space and spent hours there so that we could reaffirm for them who they are, make sure they felt safe and taken care of. I've had patients who come in because the world is so violent against the trans community that they needed to just sit in a waiting room and feel comfortable and feel welcomed. I've had patients who've come in because they don't know where their next meal is going to come from, and they know that if they come see us, we're going to help them figure it out, and we're going to be with them. We created a space that people wanted to be in, and where people felt that they could be who they are. I think my biggest claim to fame with the Trans Health Program is that people come to see us even when they don't have an appointment. And I don't know anyone else who goes to see their doctor when they don't have an appointment. Most people hide away and shy away from going to see the doctor, but people come to see us every single week just to say hi and just to be in our space. And so it has been a journey, and it's been an incredible journey for me to learn from all of these patients and to learn from their stories. I want to just end with one last thing, which is this transition that I'm making from medicine into politics, and the beauty of who's been with me on this journey, and that is that Corey learned not from a visit, but from my website that I am running for Congress. And he became the earliest and most incredible supporter of this campaign, and has gone out and shared his story with people, shared my story with people, and has affirmed for me why I'm doing this. It's because everybody in this country, everybody in this world deserves to be who they are and deserves to be affirmed for that. And if I can do anything to move us in that direction, I will do whatever I can. I will do that work that is hard, but is certainly right for us to do. So that's my story of the Transgender Health Program. But I want to say it's really Corey's story. It's really my patient's story. And thank you for letting me share it with all of you.
Thank you so much. I think Jeremy wanted to say a couple words before I take the mic back.
Thank you, Andrew. I wanted to do that in the right fashion before I just stole the mic from you. So first of all, I wanted to make sure that I pointed out, first of all, Dr. Goldstein, thank you for so much for being here. I wanted to make sure that everybody saw, I posted in the chat, but I'm going to post it one more time, Dr. Goldstein's website. If you want to know more about him and his campaign for Congress, that is where you would find it. I would recommend to everybody that you look at it. I've done, since all of this, I've done some extensive research into that website, and I am deeply impressed. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And I'm going to, because I know we have only one more speaker left, and I'm not going to butt in a second time, I'm going to take my chance right now, before we even have our last speaker, who, by the way, is fantastic, and you don't want to miss her, to thank everybody. This is a really special night for us at Boston for All, and all of us who are just kind of trying to do what we can. This started as a project to entertain people and sort of do whatever we could. And now we're kind of really so excited that so many change agents, so many people who are really involved in trying to actively improve the community have joined us. So from the bottom of my heart, I just want to thank everybody for being a part of this. And again, remember, what we are really here for is to support Violence in Boston and the incredible work that they're doing. And again, you can find them at violenceinboston.org. And I would recommend that everybody spend the time to look at what they're doing and see how you can be involved also in the work that they're doing. Again, thank you, everybody. Andrew, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Goldstein, again for speaking tonight. It's very inspiring when you hear that people, and it's a mix of emotions when you hear that people in 2020 in the United States are fighting for human rights. It's inspiring, but it's also, you have to take a moment to think, like, why is it taking so long in so many different areas? And tonight, we're having all of these amazing stories with all of these amazing people. And I just, the message I think we want to get out there tonight is that we're starting conversations, right? We're starting to listen better, and we're starting to learn better. And I want to thank the people who have offered their perspective tonight. And I want to thank you for giving me and other people who are listening tonight the opportunity to learn new perspectives and to help people in Boston and other areas and connect people, whether it's in the chat and the people are going to get connected with different resources or different ways to help. Thank you all for all of the work that you're doing. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to help violence in Boston, help the victims that come to their door and experience violence. So we have one more speaker tonight, Cristina Aguillera-Sandoval. She's originally from Venezuela. She's an activist at heart. Being an immigrant is a central part of her identity. She has led policy and political campaigns aimed at elevating human rights and creating opportunities for people of color in the United States and Venezuela. She's worked on campaigns for Senator Ed Markey and State Representative Nica Elgardo. Cristina co-founded Boston Redes en Acción in Venezuela and currently works as the director of partnerships at Act Blue. Cristina Aguilera-Sandoval, I'm so excited that you're here tonight. I'm so excited that you're our final teller, and we're so excited to hear what you have to say. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Can you all hear me? All right. Thank you to everyone at within all of your extensive team that has been doing not just these events but so many just wonderful events. It's hard to go after phenomenal and really admire musicians, activists, public servants, educators, social workers, doctors. It's been just such a great chance to listen to a lot of what you were saying before and your stories that are very moving. First of all, I just want to give a shout out to my personal training during COVID. My dance trainer, Annalise, that is right there with Julia Mejia's daughter. She's been training all of us with her dance moves during COVID-19. And I really thank you for making every day so exciting during this crisis. I just want to tell you a little bit about, my journey. And I want you to just kind of close your eyes for a second and just think, just see the pictures that I'm going to tell you, because they're very vivid in me and they're part of why I'm here and how I landed here. So this first image is just me, 20 years old, riding my bicycle towards this one office, miles and miles to get to this office of the university where I was. That university is the University of Carabobo in Valencia, Venezuela, where I was studying business administration, and was a public and free university. And because public free universities have existed in Venezuela for 100 years. And I woke up that day to a national strike. The entire country paralyzed. Right now, that doesn't seem so wild because this country is paralyzed and the world has been paralyzed for a little bit. But back then, years and years ago, it was a big deal to see the streets completely empty, no gas, and the only way to mobilize from one place to another was riding your bicycle or walking, because the strike was created by many to try to just really stop the threats from the government to turn little by little into a dictatorship. At the moment, the biggest threat that I saw around me was Hugo Chavez saying and threatening to send the military to my public university, a university of 36,000 students that had existed for over 100 years, and that was the fifth best university in the country, and it was hard to get in. And to think about the military running it was very scary. so the whole student community mobilized and organized in this small office of the university where many of us could just ride our bikes to, and just started to figure out how do we just use all of this energy and all of this time that we have in our hands to stop the government from this big threat that to harm our public education. And we were able to just organize this beautiful group that made a lot of noise and had a 1 million people march in the middle of the streets of Valencia, where I actually got to meet who's now my husband. And in all of these protests and just big rallies, we were met with the government throwing tear gas to us, with rocks going from one place to another, with just lots of violence and very oppressive police that was trying to stop students from the right to rally and the right to protest and the right to be on the streets stopping what was a threat for our education. And one thing that was great is that we felt victorious because at the very end of the big strike, the university was not militarized as he was threatening. But the whole country was in a massive economic crisis because the way in which the strike was called was not necessarily bottom up. It wasn't by the people. It wasn't including the voices of the many. It was by a group of leaders that decided to speak for others and that just had no clue what organizing meant and how to really engage in a grassroots level and make sure that everyone was behind it. So I had a taste. I had been right before that an exchange student in New Jersey, and my host dad worked at Unite here for many years. Well, before Unite, the labor union. And so I had an opportunity to do like a 3-week internship and learn about organizing in the United States. And as soon as this strike was over, not only was I completely broke and my family was really struggling, but that was the case for many in the country, and I wanted to just learn organizing and honestly make some money. So I called the people that I had worked with, and they told me, "Come, we have, we'll have a job and an internship for you." So I landed in New York, where I worked to organize retail workers in H&M and in other stores. Initially kind of as an undercover young person working in the store, and then helping launch the campaign with my coworkers and people who were way too many single moms doing incredible work every day to make it, and many just being discriminated in many ways, but also taken advantage of. And so in that process, I was there for 6 months and got a taste of organizing, got some skills, but I returned to Venezuela because I wanted to finish my education in the university. As soon as I graduated, I was like, I need more of this. I need to, Venezuela is still kind of in diapers in terms of organizing tools, techniques, strategies, grassroots engagement, and I just needed to learn more so that I could bring it back. So I landed so the same people gave me an opportunity to work with them, and I landed in Phoenix, Arizona, organizing laundry workers. And one pattern that I saw when I was organizing poultry workers in North Carolina and airport workers in Detroit and in so many places was that all of these workers were minorities, and the majority of them were immigrants. And the ones that were exploited the most were refugees. And it felt very close to my heart because I was an immigrant myself, and I realized that all they were missing was information. They had, they didn't need it to be empowered. They had their inner power. They had, they were brave enough to move to this country to start a new life with their family. But they were not being informed enough about their rights, about their opportunities that were out there for them. They were just intimidated that because they were undocumented or other, or refugees and needed to find a job real quick to resettle, then they couldn't aspire or dream for anything better. So after working on that for a little bit, I felt like my calling was more immigrants' rights, and I needed to change policies. I needed to learn how to change the policies here. So I had an opportunity to do a master's in like Singapore of all places. But when I came back, I started working with the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition and was organizing and directing all the organizing and policy work to make sure that we could shift and change so many policies in the local level and the federal level that we're just putting a big like roof like right here to my community, to immigrants, to people that were here to work so hard and to give a better life to their families. And it was just so unfair that there were so many policies in like stopping that from happening and so many people like intentionally trying to stop that. That was in the times of like the Arizona bills, and so many things were happening. After several years, I felt happy that a few legislations passed and things that that were progressive and that were moving, but not enough, and not the ones that would be really life-changing for them. And it got to a point when I just couldn't take it anymore. And I realized, you know what, the advocates and the people that are working so hard to change what's happening in this country are hitting a constant wall. And that wall is called the will of the legislators to take action and to do the right thing and to really, truly represent their communities. So I decided to, had the opportunity and decided to run the campaign for Nika Lugardo. And I was her campaign manager, which was wild because that was my very first campaign and it was a very hard one. And Nika is just such an incredible person and so inspirational. And when we were able to, with like all the amazing amount of people that got involved, including some of you here, Mary, Kristen. It was so, seeing that wave of 2018 of just incredible people ready to really push the boundaries and change and call out all the things that were going wrong was just such a great personal accomplishment. And throughout all of these, one thing that I always brought with me is, I'm Venezuelan, and I came to this country to learn organizing, to bring it back to my community. And every single step of that journey and every single thing that I've learned, even though I have not been able to like fully go back and settle back in my country, I've used it to create movements here that were able to quadruple the number of Venezuelans registered to vote so that we could vote in the elections here and really push the the consulate that at the time was owned by the regime to try to let us have our right to vote. And at least we're never able to stop Maduro or Chavez, and it's not a mystery anymore, all the horrors that my people are leaving, that my grandma over there is going through, that, I literally part of my day today, instead of finish work or getting ready for this, I was making phone calls to try to buy electric stoves because there is no gas in the entire state of Carabobo, and there's no other way for, my grandma, thank goodness, has a microwave. Others don't, so don't have a way to cook. So I was able to get some of those to several of my family members. But all this to say, like, I carry this with me. I'm never gonna stop supporting my community and doing everything parallel. I was lucky to see how, you know, from Venezuela is very controversial here, especially within the progressive movement. There's a lot of misunderstandings of what's happening, and if you're progressive, you think that being, you know, supporting, for many, it's been that supporting like that regime is like the right thing to do. For others, like, no, that cannot be the right thing to do when all these human rights violations are happening. But it takes leaders like Mika and like Senator Ed Markey, for whom I ran the field operation in 2019, to take just like the real stance where it's not about what they think or what Americans think. It's about asking Venezuelans what's going on in their country and making some decisions around that. And I think there's a lot of parallel things, and I don't mean this in any type of offensive or disrespectful way, but with the Black Lives Matter movement, it's really not about what we think they're going through if we are not Black and have not experienced this. It's about listening to them, listening to their struggle, and following their steps and their leadership to do everything we can to be the right allies and the right supporters and the right, and dismantle everything that has made this just so hard for their journey. So I had completely lost track of time, but all of this to say, and to close it up, one of the things that connected me with this group and to Jeremy and all of you is because we created Redes en Acción Venezuela in 2015, because we saw that there were so many Venezuelans arriving here, not anymore with like tourist visa, but like through the border in so many ways, just trying to find an out. And right now, you know, there's I'm trying to remember what's the percentage, but I believe it's a really high percentage. 4 million people in a country of 30 million people left in the last few years because it's unbearable to live in Venezuela. And they left with nothing, and they left by walk. And many of them are now landing here. And I'm glad that I had all this training on immigration to be able to help them. And my husband is an immigration attorney, so that comes handy. But I think that Redes en Acción was so important for us to create it, and thank you, Michael, but that's like the lamest Facebook. We've done almost no social media presence because it's all about the one-on-one and bringing in people who have been here for many, many years and people who have recently arrived, and engaging them in networking sessions where they can help each other, very intentional. They can ask exactly what they need, and they can offer exactly what they can offer. And that has given people jobs, that has given people food, that has given people friends, that has given people a community. And I'm really grateful that last year you guys did a run to raise some funds for Redes en Acción, and we will keep going on, and I will keep like all of my work kind of in parallel with the activism here and the activism in Venezuela, because at the end of the day, it's really all about justice and about giving people dignity, because that's why people organize, for dignity and respect. So thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I loved your story. I love the idea of giving people the justice that deserve justice and giving people a voice when they feel voiceless. And I'm so happy that Boston for All was able to help your organization. And I want you to know that I'll be thinking about your family in Venezuela. I have a good friend from Venezuela, and he's constantly checking in on his family. And so thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for being here tonight. I want to thank everyone who has taken part tonight. We were thinking about a month ago, we felt pretty good about the last Inside Voices we had. We were going to end it on a high note. We felt really good, and then the events happened regarding George Floyd, and his murder. And, you know, we saw a moment in history that was happening, and we wanted to be a part of it and give people a voice and make sure people had the opportunity to learn from people and learn perspectives. And I want to thank everyone who came tonight. I want to thank everyone who donated to Violence in Boston. And there's going to be people who walk through the door of that organization tomorrow who will never know your name, but you are going to help them, and you're going to save lives, and you're going to make people's lives better. And there's really not more we can say about that. You've given us such an amazing gift to be able to help other people. And we're in a strange time in history. And I'm very fortunate to have spent these last 2 hours with all of you and to hear your stories. And one of my favorite things to do when you have these nights is to, while people are telling stories, is I like to go back to the gallery mode and look at people's expressions and seeing how people are taking in all these stories. So thank you for being here. It means so much to us, and we hope it meant a lot to you. Have a wonderful night, and I hope you join us for the next one. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.